All right, troops. Hello and welcome to That Mental Ginger Show with your host Andrew Durning, aka The Mental Ginger. Well, my faithful followers always get great guests on this show, don't we? And we're just stepping it up again. We've got a renowned Christian podcast host and a man who puts any type of beard that I could have to shame, Joseph Dea. Joseph, how you doing, my friend?
Not too shabby. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're very welcome, man. I always like seeing your pictures and just trying to guess what color the front of your beard's going to be this week. Well, I always think it's just so cool. I'm like, he has what I could only dream of in facial hair standards.
Right. I know for most people, tattoos are the big expression of self-creativity on the body and things like that. But I don't have a single tattoo because growing up, I was always like, what if I hate this in 20 years? I don't want something ridiculous plastered on my body. So instead, I had at one point in time, like 20 different piercings, things like that.
Wow.
And then I dyed the beard different colors and things like that.
No, in fairness, I don't have any tattoos either. I've never really seen them. Like, why do I want to add any decoration to, this house? This house is practically falling apart. So, it's like a little bit of greenery ain't gonna save this bit. She's already touched a little bit on growing up there, so that actually leads me into my first question, because one thing I like to get my guests to start off with is to tell us their origin story, because if there's one thing we all have in common, we all have an origins. So Joseph, for my faithful followers, please tell us your origin story.
So I am from the northeastern part of the United States. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but I have lived all over God's green earth. I've moved around a lot, especially in my 20s and stuff like that, doing the whole nomad thing. You know what I mean? I was very much the stereotypical 90s kid, hated the world and all of that kind of stuff. And then when the opportunity was there, I took my culinary experience and hit the road and started working in kitchens all across America.
Wow, so you essentially became Gordon Ramsay before it was cool.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, nice one, man. Whereabouts in America did your culinary skills take you? And what got you interested in being a chef in the first place?
So my dad was a chef, and that was kind of my entry point. And then when I started cooking, I just absolutely fell in love with it. I think that a good meal has started relationships, ended wars. I think a lot of very, very beautiful things can happen over a good meal. And I've gone over, so I've lived in the Twin Cities. I lived in Texas for a little while. I lived in New York. I lived in Ohio. I was out in California for a little bit. Spent a little bit of time in Florida, stuff like that.
Oh, nice one, man. Any famous chefs that you can claim to have ran into on your travels? Or even run into man's versus food?
I haven't run into him, but you mentioned Gordon Ramsay. I tried to be on, I auditioned for one of the seasons of Hell's Kitchen. And
wow. I
realized very, very quickly, I in no way, shape, or form have the temperament to deal with that crap. I don't care if he's playing a character on TV or whatever, because he's not like that. It's very much a character.
No, he's a lovely guy. He's really lovely.
Yeah, but still, like, that part of my brain, I could not reconcile some dude sitting there hollering at me and all of that kind of stuff. Absolutely not.
That kind of don't come barking orders in my kitchen kind of thing.
Yeah, basically, especially when people don't talk about the psychological thing of, when you are the guy, right, in the kitchen, when you are chef, people come to you, you know what I mean? And to have to go into somebody else's kitchen and start kind of back down at the bottom of the barrel is a very frustrating experience.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an alpha kind of mentality, of like, you're in my kitchen, it's
Yeah,
my rules. Well,
basically.
because I know a couple of chefs locally as well. One thing I always find so ironic is that they're around food all the time, yet they are the skinniest mofo's I have ever seen. Well, and I'm guessing it's because you just don't get time to have a rest.
Yeah, so you have to absolutely be head over heels in love with the restaurant business in order for it to work. Because it is so demanding. You are very much married to your work. And so when it comes to, when it comes to working in the industry, you're always running, you're always moving. It's usually not until you hit what the industry calls paper chef status to that you actually start to see people being able to like slow down and not be running and running and running the whole time.
So what's paper chef? Is that kind of like, if you get like your Michelin star or anything like that, or is it that the bit before it?
So there's a cutoff point where you stop working the line and you start just basically dealing with the administrative side, the business side, things like that. And so if you are around chefs and you've got one who's a little bit longer in the tooth, has been around the block, something like that, you might hear some of the younger chefs rib him and call him a paper chef because, they stop practicing actually cooking and it's more about the title than the actual practice.
I think I get what it is. It's like my dad, he's a painter and decorator, so he's a tradesperson. But I can barely like do anything trades wise, or at least I didn't think so until I was about 32. So like 2 years ago. But so I got jobs in like admin and things like that, and same with my brother. So he would always call us the pencil pushers. Well,
Yeah.
and I always used to come back at him going, yeah, but you said you always wanted us to have a better life than you did. Yeah, well, me and my dad always have that good bit of banter. I know he's listening, so Dad, I love you really. But did you not think? Did your dad ever like see you kind of doing cooking and stuff, and just have like a ridiculous amount of pride, for you for doing like his kind of trade? I only take
He would have.
Yeah. No, on you go. On you go. What the guest really should do the speaking.
If he would have absolutely hated every single second of me being in the restaurant business because he too wanted something more for me. You know what I mean? So this is where we get into a bit of the other side of that coin, things that have transpired a little bit closer to present day and things like that. But when I was a kid, I was a teenager, very early teenager, my dad committed suicide. And so it was something that kind of, at first it became this almost tribute sort of thing when I got into the restaurant business. But then, I took it and, the restaurant business is perfect for somebody who does not have an identity for themselves, that doesn't know who they are. They're lost. They don't have a good barometer of who they are, what they want to be, because chef is a title that if you are in the business, you should be getting into the business to become a chef. If you aren't in the business to become a chef, then get the hell out of the business. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things, because it is so demanding. It is so hard. It's backbreaking work, that at least if you hit the status of being able to hold that title, there's something to that. So he did. He rose the ranks, self-taught like I was. I never went to culinary school and all of that. So in a lot of respects, some good, some bad. I have lived in that shadow. I actually, it's part of why I got out of the culinary scene here, because, before I moved, we're talking something like 6-8 years ago, something like that. I was Joe's kid. I was very much like, he had worked with enough people in the industry that any place that I could have worked, they knew my old man. And so that was one of those things that I was very much in his shadow in a big regard, which again was part of the reason why I packed my bags and did the whole, you don't own more than you can fit in your car and still be able to sleep comfortably and hit the road.
Wow. I'm really sorry that that you had to go through such a traumatic thing at such a young age, man.
So the thing that I've found as far as that goes, and this kind of goes into my whole stance and what I do in ministry and what I do speaking about the mental health community and things like that. There is no such thing as the promise of an easy life, even for Christians. I think that's a misnomer sometimes. It's this whole idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you will. And I think that that's a facade. I think there's the reality of we all, whether or not we choose them or not, are and end up with our own set of demons. And I think the temptation is to run from those demons, or to medicate those demons, or to not reconcile what those demons are, or how to handle them. But I think I think anybody turns a page when they're willing to turn the page and stop running, and for me, that takes the turn of, I can, I commonly say that my favorite hymn is Amazing Grace, because I was that guy. I was that wretch that just, I lived a whole life away from Jesus and things like that. But when I came to him, I asked, okay, so what now? I was half dead, super sick, the whole 9 yards. But what now? And I've realized that it's still living out this life. We still have to live out this life and go through the paces, but it's living in victory and living in a stance that says, okay, this happened, but this is not my identity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it's quite interesting how the guests that I've had on throughout the run of my podcast since I kind of upgraded, they've all had, or at least a good few of them have had like some sort of spiritual awakening throughout their lives. Like the very first guest I had on, Harmony, his life was basically like Breaking Bad, and then he found faith and now he's doing brilliantly. The coach, because I always mispronounce his last name, so I call him the coach. But he was the same. Like, he was living like a Wolf of Wall Street style kind of life, and then had again a spiritual awakening, and now he's doing so well. So, what was your kind of spiritual awakening point?
So I call it my come to Jesus moment.
Everybody calls it something different. That's the one that I kind of go with, like when I had my kind of spiritual awakening when it happened to me.
Right. So after I left the restaurant business, I was done. I was burned out. Like I said, you gotta love it with your whole heart. And if you don't, it is a special kind of torture. So I got out and I got into business, and I was king of the mountain as far as sales and business go and all of that kind of stuff. I built my empire. And then one day I woke up and half my face didn't work. I'd had a severe mouth infection that presented very, very similarly to what advanced stage cancer would look like. Wow. So here I am. We're talking, not quite 30. Yeah, no, I wasn't 30. and I'm sitting across the doctor, and they're using words like cancer and things like that. And so that, you realize when you are living life to make money, living life for success, all of that kind of stuff, there are some obstacles that you go through you can't throw enough money at. You can't manipulate your way out of that situation. You can't smooth talk your way out of a situation. Doesn't matter how big your kingdom is. It doesn't matter any of that kind of stuff. And so I had this moment of my world broke in a lot of regards, because I had, so to rewind for a little bit of context, I grew up in the church, air quotes, because but the same woman that was teaching Sunday school was the same woman that got drunk and beat me and my sister. You know what I mean? So I had a messed up relationship relationship with the church. And I had at this point, after, playing the character, I played the character for a little bit. I really, really tried. And I walked away, and I was like, you know what, this whole thing is hokum, all of that kind of stuff. Our true savior is technology. And I was a transhumanist. If you're not familiar, a transhumanist is somebody who believes in the ascension of mankind by way of technology. And that being the key to immortality. And so I loosely held that as if I had a spiritual point of view, all of that kind of stuff. But all it was me pushing down this whole idea of, we all have an expiration date. And that was something that I never really reconciled until then. And then the floodgates opened, and I shattered into a million pieces. Mentally, I broke down. I still remember pulling over on the side of the road because I just couldn't function. You know what I mean? Because it all hit me that it didn't matter how much money I had. It didn't matter how much success I had. I couldn't outrun the Reaper. And so I'm like left in this position of, okay, what do I do? I have lost my kingdom. I have lost, because I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. Half my face didn't work. And so I'm like, you know what? Okay, I know of a local church, whatever. Maybe the padre can say something that'll make me feel good for 30 seconds. Fine, whatever. I literally have nothing to lose. That's a key statement. I've got nothing to lose. Because in my mind, I had lost any hope. All hope was gone at that point. And so I walk into the church on the Sunday morning, and cue the feel good scene here, because this very much is going to sound like the scene out of a cheesy Christian movie. But track with me here for a second. I sit down, and I'm in the nosebleeds of a mega church. Like, this is not like some kind of intimate thing. And the guy that takes the stage is, I don't know, I would put him at late 30s, early 40s, like on the younger side of what would be considered a seniorized pastor.
Right.
And he starts talking about, he goes, I want to be honest with you guys. I still have my moments of doubt. I still struggle with doubt. And I'm like, wait a minute. This dude literally gets paid to stand in front of the pulpit and preach. And he is one of the same people that, because that was always my thing, right? Everybody puts their stock in this thing, but what if you're wrong? What if you dedicate your whole life to this thing and it's all hokum? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I hear that, and I'm like, that had that moment of softening my heart. In the Bible, we see these different instances of a person's heart being softened to the gospel message. And it was from that moment I had heard the words. I had heard the gospel story tons of times previously. I knew the words to the songs. I knew the right times to raise my hand, all of that kind of stuff. I had heard it all before, but it was in that moment that I had my actual gospel moment. And I hit my knees, and I'm like, all right, Jesus, if you're real, I need my burning bush. I need you to get through to me in a very, very radical way, not just a feeling. I need to see something. I need to feel something. And it was at that moment that I felt a pair of arms come around me and hold on to me. There was nobody around me. Like I said, I'm up in the nosebleeds.
Mm.
And so my world shattered in the best possible way, because I'm like, what, this is real. Like so all of this is real. And and that was when I met Jesus for the first time at that moment, and was able to reconcile that, you know what, we all have a horror story. You know what I mean? We all have
It's like
our own.
it's like I say, we've all got an origin story, so it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
We've all got those dark
Yeah.
parts as well as the light.
Right. And so being
Can
able
I actually
to
ask
reconcile.
you a question, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Well, and it's one that, like I said, I've had other guys that have kind of came on and spoke about, you know, their kind of their spiritual awakening moment, and a lot of them have said that they've literally felt like kind of Jesus touched them. Like they've actually felt someone like kind of like hold them, or felt some sort of force like push on them. Now, when that, I always feel, well, I'll be honest, I feel like my spiritual awakening didn't happen to me then, because I never felt it. I never felt like the hand of someone like that. I never felt it. It was more like, well, I need help. I need someone to get me out of the worst situation I had been in my life at that point. What? But I never felt like a hand say, like holding, like giving me that comfort, and saying it was okay. It was just, but I more felt like there was a guy in my work that I worked with at the time, Scott, and he is like, he's devout Christian and all that kind of stuff. And I got to know him through mental health support groups, and I said, look, it was him that I reached out to, and I was like, I've hit rock bottom, and I really don't know where to go, and I'm struggling. And I was like, how do you cope? Well, and he was like, well, why don't we do a Bible study? Well, and I was like, oh, all right, fair enough. Well, and we did a Bible study in a McDonald's in Glasgow, which is the most weird place to have one. But it was then I started feeling, I felt less alone. It's like I said, I'd been removed from my kids, I'd been removed from my wife. I was considered a danger to everybody, like, because of the way my mental health was. There was like, I was trying to choose to fight, like, to keep going, but I just couldn't feel like I could. See if you don't feel that kind of, that literal touch of Jesus. Does it mean that I've not had my awakening yet? And I've been terrified to ask anybody that spoke about religion this question, because it's been bothering me for a little while, because I'm feeling like I'm just not, like I'm not there yet, even though my faith's a lot more rock solid than it was when I was a kid, because I got told that I was ginger and left-handed and that I was going to hell when I was 7. Well, so yeah, so it was kind of rocky that way, and it was the same deal. Knew everything, didn't really. Well, I just felt I was like, what kind of God chooses not to like somebody because of the colour of their hair or what hand they write with? Which I realised is obviously a load of BS. But because my faith is more rock solid, I was like, oh well, now I believe there is something after here. I've not went out and, like, you know, stopped cursing or stopped drinking. I didn't drink in the first place. But I still curse like a sailor that's on leave, because I think, like, it doesn't matter the words that come out your mouth as long as you're doing the actions to back it up, like, and being a good person. But I've still been feeling a bit like a fraud. Is that normal? Am I more nuts than I think I am? But help me out here, man.
Imposter syndrome is a thing when it comes to trying to figure out what, like, the what's what as far as all of this stuff goes. So you are not alone in thinking that way. I'm taken back to, in the Gospels, Jesus has this moment after he comes back, after he had died and rose again, and you have the unbelieving apostle, the person who's like, whoa, wait, no, I will believe when I can put my hand in the wound, when I see him with my own 2 eyes. And this is where the verse comes from, of blessed are those who believe without seeing, basically.
Yeah.
And that's true. That is true. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. But that doesn't mean damned are those that see. Just like if you don't see, doesn't mean that you're like blessed then, like you're less of a Christian or something along those lines.
Yeah.
The thing about God is he will meet us where we are at, you know, and that's part of the trouble that comes sometimes with this sliding benchmark of that kind of the world. And I'm finding it's not just America. I used to bust America's chops a lot for this as it being squarely an American problem, but no, the more ministry that I do with people from other parts of the world, I'm finding that other parts of the world kind of make their own criteria of what does it mean? How have you finally arrived? Here's the gimmick. We haven't. Nobody has arrived at this point. And by that, I mean, we walk through this life and we, to varying degrees, need to have more proof, less proof. Some people need to connect in a different way than others. For me, God knew that I was the unbelieving apostle. I was that person. I needed to see in order to believe. I have a very hard time, and I'm sure that you've heard this before from some of your other Christian guests, that when you've gone through the paces, when you've seen the hell that this world has to offer, sometimes faith is hard to come by. Just taking it at faith value is very hard to come by. And when it comes to these supernatural sort of instances, more often than not, if you talk to those people that you talk to, there's some kind of something there that like, no, I need to tactilely experience this. And I also believe that if that's something that you truly desire and you pray about it, then you may experience that. That may be something that you experience, but it's always got to be within the realms of what is biblically true, what is biblically accurate. You know what I'm saying? And so when you experience other people that have, you know, I take like the spiritual gifts, for instance, right? I don't have experience with, you know, the only time that I've ever been around somebody who was quote unquote speaking in tongues, I was helping out with a worship team and we're praying and the pastor starts shalalama ding donging all over the place, just hooting and hollering and all this kind of stuff. And like, that's not scripturally accurate. That's just the reality of it. And so these things get used and perversed in a lot in order to push something, but I haven't, that's the extent of my supernatural experience that I have had in that regard is that moment. But what do I have? I came to this understanding about God. I got better. Obviously, I can move my face. I can do, like, I've gotten better from that moment. And so I was left with this thing of, okay, so what now? I survived. I have this relationship, all of this kind of stuff. I took a small detour into the prosperity gospel. And thankfully I was around some strong Christians that were able to showcase the error of, you know, God wants you wealthy, God wants you healthy, all of this kind of stuff. And so now I'm left with what now? And that was what started the process of starting Buddy Walk with Jesus, with ministering to a very specific group of people that have experienced this life, people that have gone through the paces and haven't spent their whole life in the church or spent their whole life with Jesus, because the key is the only way that you make sense of an all-knowing creator God is by understanding that it is a relational relationship. It is one that when I get up in the morning, I am saying hi to a friend. When I am praying, it is not these and thous and our fathers and Hail Marys and all of that kind of stuff. It is a conversation, an open dialogue with God. And when that is where you are operating from, my friend, you will find that it's not so much about the tactile as it is experiential, because you are having dialogue with the creator, because that's gospel. If you ask, God does not hold back. That doesn't mean that you're going to get $1 million in a pony, but that does mean that if you open up that dialogue and you are willing to have that conversation with him, he will meet you where you are at. So there's this. So part of the problem is when it's not about relationship and it's about the experience and the event and the feelings and all of that kind of stuff, you can lose sight of where does the rubber meet the road? What makes this authentic? What is the criteria for this? And we are all broken creatures. I am a Christian that fundamentally believes that the human race is destitute without God. We are all born into sin. We all have sin nature. That's not pretty, but the pretty is that we can have hope beyond that. We can have hope outside of ourselves. So be careful as you compare your story with somebody else's, or you compare what you've been through to what somebody else has been through, or how you experience God and things like that. Because when you have this when you have this relationship, you realize, hey, so Holy Spirit is with me regardless. The in the good, the bad, the in between, when I sin, when I don't sin, all of that, he is there. And so when you there's already this layer of openness. Okay, God, why do I need to feel like I need to have this touch experience? Why do I feel like I need to go through this certain thing? Or why am I still doing this thing? Why am I still cursing? Why am I still engaging with this, that, or the other thing? And you start asking those questions and you're exploring where you're at and doing inventory and opening yourself up to be able to experience the immersive relationship with God.
Well, thanks, man. Well, for any listeners that were expecting to talk about what the arts, it is coming, but I really needed that. Personally, been struggling with a couple of things lately, and yeah, that just shows how good you are that I was able to speak to you in the flesh for approximately 33 minutes and go, right, this is something that's been bugging me for a very long time, and I was just able to ask it. So thank you for being that kind of open guy to help me with it.
So I want to real quick. I just want to add something.
Yeah, of course.
There's when you read Matthew 5-7, you read, blessed are those, blessed are these, and you go through this list, right, of things that are very easy. That's what the world would call a good person. Here's the gimmick. None of us are good people. Even the best people, we're not good people, because you just spend 30 seconds looking at humanity and you'll tell that people are not good inherently. But when we engage with that relationship with God, when we spend time with God, it's a cause and effect sort of thing. We spend time with God, and the effect is that these things overflow from us. They naturally bubble up. The Bible talks a lot about the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God, in a lot of respects, is taught to be heaven. That's the kingdom not yet to come. But when you read that, there is very present language to that. And when you engage with God, you are bringing forward the kingdom of God presently every single day. That's part of it. When you are talking about God, when you are following God, when you are living as a disciple, that is the kingdom. And that's part of this whole relationship aspect of it. So I push that hard because, you know, life, I'm convinced life isn't changed on a Sunday morning. Life is changed by going through the reps every single day with God.
No, definitely, man. Right, so let's talk about the podcast that you set up, and so it's specifically linked to religion as well. So tell my listeners and my followers. I feel more guilty saying followers now because especially when I'm talking to more kind of Christian aspect, but that just stuck. So tell my followers where we can find your podcast, title, what it's about, where I can get it, and why you decided to go with it.
So the flagship show that, because for me, I feel like podcasting is like how most people talk about tattoos. You get one and then
Yeah.
suddenly you're hooked. Yeah, I'm on a couple of different shows.
Yeah,
The
well, plug
flagship
them.
is
Plug them.
okay. The flagship is Buddy Walk with Jesus. It's it was born out of that time after having had my come to Jesus moment. The whole time for like a decade, I was friends with this guy named Edgar. We had met at a men's spiritual retreat several years ago, and we kind of stayed in each other's lives, even when I walked away, because I knew that he was a dude that would not judge me, that would listen and field my questions and let me poke and prod his faith and all of those kinds of things. And he never judged me for it. And he was the type of dude that made the hair in the back of your neck stand up in the best possible way. He just had that kind of really 3 and 4 dimensional relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so we were talking after I moved back to Pennsylvania, and we realized that there is a need for discussing the everyday aspects of what this means to be a Christian. That it's not just boiled into a nice little sermon. It doesn't boil down to 3 speaking points that a pastor can put up on a screen on a Sunday morning, that it's every day, it's immersive. And so the Buddy Walk ministry was born with the idea starting out that we would be ministering to the everyman, that this is, the common person that has gone through the paces. That has also taken an additional aspect of, we are a big part of our ministry is in India now, because that's just a spot that is very near and dear to my heart. And so we've been going now for about 2.5 years. When we started, we dedicated ourselves to a weekly format, and we've just kept on keeping on with it, and we've continued. We started with basically us and our wives as the listeners, and it's grown over time and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I find myself whenever I get in front of the microphone, I think of for those of you comic book fans out there, a show called Smallville. Michael Rosenbaum, Lex Luthor from Smallville, has a show called Inside of You. It's also predominantly speaks within the mental health arena, and he had said something on one of his episodes that really resonated with me. The longer that the red light's on, the more likely it is that you're going to end up getting vulnerable in front of it. And that is something that I've really tried hard to bring to the show, is that I am not a character on this thing. This is the real me that you get, you know what I mean? And being open and honest about life and all of its complexities and all of that. So
Yeah. No, definitely, man. And obviously, you're a big superhero comic book kind of fan like myself, which is brilliant. I absolutely love that. But so where can we find all your podcasts? Where's the different sites? What days they on? All that kind of stuff.
So, Buddy Walk with Jesus, you can find at buddywalkwithjesus.com. That drops every Wednesday. I'm also on a show called Systematic Geekology, which
I
you
love
can
that
find
show, by the way. Love it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You can find that at systematicgeekology.org. That new episodes drop Tuesdays and Thursdays. That one's a bit of a circus. There's like 10 of us that rotate in and out and things like that, talking about all things geek related, with a Christian hint to it. You know what I mean? I think for
it definitely hits my niche right there.
Yeah, and that's something that we found, that like, different aspects of what we do exist out in the wild, but there's nobody specifically doing what we look to do, and that's exploring, all good IPs, whether it's superheroes, sci-fi, Star Wars, Doctor Who, whatever the fandom is, good geek-related culture will test what you believe and how you believe about certain situations, and what you believe to be right and wrong and good and bad and all of those kinds of things. And so, yes, we nerd out and all of that, but then we take it that step further and discuss the spiritual and philosophical implications.
That's the parts that I love, though, because you're going down when I first listened to it, it was like, right, this is the kind of, like you get your Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, all that kind of stuff, and you're hearing the same kind of things. Well, it's all different in how they say it, but the points. But when you started to flip it round into that kind of side of it, with the spiritual, religious kind of aspects, that was when I was like, these guys are really onto something quite good here, because it's the way you kind of flip it, and you don't realize as an audience member that you flipped it. But that's how you're engaged with the show. So that one I definitely recommend, because it has major geekology. Seriously, so Tuesdays and Thursdays, same times that my show's on. In fairness, Tuesday, Thursdays, even though we branched to Saturdays. Don't branch to Saturdays. Don't take my audience. What about I seen there was another podcast that you're starting. I think you're only at the time of this recording about 80 episodes in, but when it drops, you'll be further on. And that's the Kingdom one. So tell me about that.
So I started last year. I decided to branch off on my own and do kind of an interview show. 2020 was a rough year for a lot of us. Mm-hmm. But for me, I was left after 2020, I was left with this feeling of, okay, so, it didn't help that like early days, I lost a friend. So like this was real to me very early on. And I don't know how it was in your part of the world, but here Christians couldn't shut up for more than 30 seconds about political people or masks or vaccinations or what we should be doing, or, religious freedoms and all of that kind of stuff, and just love on somebody. Because you think about how many, whether or not you like it or don't, or this or that, thousands, tens of thousands of people died and left behind loved ones for every single one. That's a lot of wreckage left behind in a global,
a lot of scars. A lot of scars that everybody's got.
Yes. And so I had ended up getting to this point where I became part of the problem. I became another one of the barking voices. I got angry. I didn't want anything to do with other Christians. I didn't want to hear nothing from nobody, because I was so angry at, because of everything going on and the inability to just come alongside each other in love. And so God brought me through this process of relationship therapy of sorts. So I started doing a mini series, and it called Kingdom on the Road, that basically the tagline was exposing Christians to other Christians, getting in front of other Christians and letting them tell their story and discussing things and all of that, but very unformatted. You just let the conversation go in the direction that it goes.
Yeah.
And it was by and large pretty successful for a miniseries, and especially because like that's been an IP that's been dormant for the better part of 6 months, and people are still tuning into it. People are still like, it's still getting active listeners and things like that. And so you fast forward the clock, and I've realized that there is a heightened need for a panel show of a collection of the saints to come together. And by saints, I just mean Christians. It's
we're not meaning South Park super best friends kind of thing.
And with the idea that if we can all come together and we worship at the same cross, we serve the same God, we might have different opinions about this, that, or the other thing, but we come together in unity and love, showcasing the unity of the kingdom, then that will be huge for showcasing the power of God, especially if you get a group of people together that are willing to not shy away from, hey, guess what? Yes, I'm a Christian, but I'm bipolar. And so I struggle with all of these things. That's where a lot of my mental health speaking came from, was I got sick and tired of hearing people say that you can just pray bipolar away, that you just need to choose joy and all of this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I got frustrated with it. And so I started speaking out against it. And so when you have all of these people that are having authentic testimony, there's power in that. And so that's where the reboot of Kingdom on the Road comes in. We're getting ready to launch by doing a pair of live streams, kind of a get to know the hosts sort of thing. Everybody tells their story, all of that you can find on our Facebook page. But yeah, so that's going to be a new project coming into 2022.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, man. That sounds like a really good prospect. If you need to, like, some random ginger guy, just give me a shout.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I could be the put the cat amongst the pigeons. What, and ask it what, like I've already tested the waters by asking the question that I've not asked anybody else about, like the doubts that I was having. So yeah, I'd be okay to come on. But yeah, so I know beforehand you were like, well, how long do we normally have? And I was like, 30 to 40 minutes. We're at 47 minutes now, but if it's that way, I just loved to listen to what you were saying, man. Like you're so passionate and articulate with everything that you talk about. You want to do it for good reasons. Like you're a good guy. Like, and again, it doesn't matter like if we're fecked up here. Like if we're doing good out with the world, that's the main thing. And I've got a lot of respect for you, like Joseph. Thank you so much for coming on. And as we're starting to come up in time, I'll round off by asking you the same question that I ask all my guests. If you could give one piece of advice to anybody that's struggling with mental health issues at this precise moment in time, what would that piece of advice be and why?
Don't run. Bring it out into the light and put lyrics to it, because the longer that it stays in the shadows, the longer that you try and run from it, the bigger it gets. And so, if you're going through mental health struggles, you're not alone. So many of us are, and putting lyrics to it, talking to somebody about it, getting help for it, all of those kinds of things does not define you. Your diagnosis doesn't define you. Those feelings, those thoughts, they don't define you either. It's just you taking responsibility for being able to push forward with the hand that you've been dealt.
Good advice. Again, very articulate. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for coming on. And now we are going to jump to Christianity's newfound favourite segment, Ask Andrew Anything. Sorry, God, please don't strike me down for that one. This is where, after me grilling my guests for approximately 49 minutes and 2 seconds, this is where we get to turn the tables around, and the guest gets to ask me a question, and I have to be 100% honest. It could go very well. It could go very badly, but that's all part of the fun. So, Joseph, do you have a question for this mental ginger?
Yeah. When it comes to When it comes to mental health, what was the moment where you realized that you were brave enough to be able to speak your story and get in front of the microphone?
100% honesty, I don't think me talking about it is being brave because I'm terrified to talk about it every single time. I feel like I have to for those that are too scared to speak up. It doesn't make it any less fearful, and this is for anybody that is struggling. It's one of my pieces of advice. Everybody's scared to talk about what's going on in their head because we all have the same fears. We think people are going to brand us as crazy, that they're going to say we should be put in a psych ward. And I'm saying this because these things have happened to me, and I've been told these things. But what no one tells you is every thought you have in your head, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, they're normal. Everybody thinks that only crazy people talk to themselves. I found that most people who don't talk to themselves are crazy. Because everybody talks to themselves to try and calm themselves down. It's a coping mechanism. It's a strategy. Well, if you can't say to your boss, well, pardon the French, oh, fuck off, you mutter it under your breath. And it still gets out. What people always say sometimes that they've got like a voice in their head and they instantly think, I'm schizophrenic. Everybody's got that voice. Everybody's got it. It's called self-doubt. And when it gets to the bad stage, like I had, as I mentioned in the previous episode, that I had that voice, and when it gets louder and it's constant negatives and it's bad negatives telling you should end your own life, and then if you don't do it, that you're a failure and a coward for not doing it, that's when something's not right. Everybody has something in their head, an inner monologue or whatever, we demon, whatever. It's when it becomes uncontrollable, that's the problem. Everything that goes on in your brain, it's normal. Everybody's been through it at some point. Everybody will go through it at some point. But it's not what is in your head that defines you. It's what you put out into the world that defines you, at least in my opinion. And I think me being scared but still talking about it is one of the reasons that I feel like I have to keep going, because so many won't. I've been there. I've had those things flung at me. I still get them flung at me. People still think that I should be in a loony bin, that I don't deserve to pick up a mic, that I'm broken, that I can't be saved. Somebody actually said that when I was starting to find faith, that I was just using it as a crutch, to get myself better, and then I was going to abandon it, which is fair enough. A lot of people would think that if you've went through your whole life going, nah, but just because I'm not actively out like on a soapbox, like saying the end was nigh because COVID came, wasn't meaning that I didn't have something inside telling me, things are going to be all right. I just chose to take the good part of it rather than the bad. Again, that's down to your thinking. Everything comes down to like how your brain works. If your brain's not working, it can affect you physically. It can affect like how you interact with other people. It can affect how you interact with your family, your kids. In some cases, like your grandparents, your parents. It can cut off really close ties. It can cut off really supportive people, and then you never get to see them again or talk to them. And when you wind up alone in that state, it's horrible. And I never want anybody to go through any of those things. They still will, because life's like that. That's just the way it is. You get good, you get bad. But if someone can come and listen to my podcast for, like a wee half hour or an hour, maybe get a bit of a laugh, maybe hear something that, they've never maybe heard before and think, maybe I don't feel so alone. Or just puts that very brief smile on someone's face, worth it. And I'll keep picking up the mic and I'll keep talking about it. So Joseph, I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
Well, I take the silence as a good point, that maybe I've just been like, I will reverberate on this.
Yeah, no. So it's the idea of being a voice to the voiceless. You know what I mean? It's there are some of us that get what this means, and some of us that are charged with the responsibility of getting in front of the microphone and discussing it and being open about it, because not everybody can be. And if what we do, if the way that we operate can help somebody, then it's worth it. If it doesn't matter if our followings on these shows are 1 or a million, if somebody's life is affected by what it is that we do, if somebody can hear that it's okay and that you're not alone and that you're not a freak for feeling these things or for going through these things or having experienced these things or things like that, then it makes every single bit of it worth it.
It really does. Well, and again, that's why we pick up the mic and keep going, because if we don't say it, who's going to?
Yeah,
Joseph,
exactly.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, my friend. You've been an amazing guest. I can already tell you're an amazing host. Because I've already admitted I listen to your stuff anyway. And please, as someone who does deal with that type of fear of picking up the mic every day, keep picking up that mic. Keep saying what needs to be said, and being as honest and upfront as you are, not shying away from any BS. I've got nothing but respect for you, man, and I'm so glad you took the time out your day to speak to me.
Thanks, man. And same with you. Keep fighting the good fight, because people need to hear what it is that you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the ramblings that you can go without, but that's just who I am. So until next time, my faithful followers, I've been Andrew Durning. This has been the brilliant Joseph Dea. Please check out his podcasts. You've got a Tuesday and a Thursday. You can come back to me on a Saturday if you want. And until next time, take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.